If you've been running your business for a while and you are good at what you do, you have a strong portfolio, you have clients that rave about you, business should not feel heavy. You don't get what you want, you get what you tolerate. And a lot of us will tolerate something far less than we actually need. We have a primal part of our brain, which is purely designed to keep us alive. It is predominantly based in emotions such as fear. If you are in a predominant energy of fear, you will attract more people who are in that energy. Your business should not feel like this is something that you have to do or like a grind. And if it starts to feel like that and you start to feel stressed, the counterintuitive solution that actually works to remove that is welcome to the Creative Courage Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Essam, and today I want to talk to you about why I am closing down my business for a whole month in August. So I am shutting my doors, I am not opening my laptop, and I am going to go and travel around Europe, and I'm going to go and see my cousin get married. Now, I posted this on LinkedIn the other day, and it got quite a reaction. Most comments were positive, but there were a few saying, "Oh, I wish I could do that," or "That sounds like you're in a very privileged position." And I totally get why people respond in that way, because to be honest, it is quite a privileged thing to be able to do. However, I have worked extremely hard over the last 7 or 8 years to build a sustainable business. And when I say a sustainable business, I mean one that makes a decent profit every month and allows me to take a salary from that business. So I'm not living hand to mouth, and that is by design, not just by default. And I want to talk to you about a few principles around this. First of all, how you can get to the point where you could just shut your business down for a month and it would have no or little impact on the longevity of that business. In fact, I think the impact it would have would be positive. So you could argue that it would have an impact, but let's just say no negative impact on your business. And the second piece is why I think this is so important. So why is it important to take a break? Why is it important to switch off? So let's talk about the first piece. Getting to the point where you can take a month without any income is a really important position, I think, to be in as a creative business for a few reasons. Number one, it means that you're operating that business in a way that is financially healthy. But number two, it means that if something happens, i.e. you lose a big client or you don't get the kind of sales that you were hoping for that quarter, you don't go into panic and survival mode. And the concept of panic and survival mode is really the foundation of both of these things. I worked quite closely with Daniel Priestley a few years ago, and one of the ideas that he used to drum into me was this concept that there are 3 modes of operating. And he simplifies how the human brain works. And he talks about at the core, we have this reptilian brain that's all about danger and fight and flight, and it's really about survival. Then we have this kind of autopilot way of operating, or autopilot part of the brain, which is really just going through the motions day to day, getting up at the same time, brushing your teeth, going to work, doing the same things without really consciously thinking about it. And then we have a mode of operating, which he talks about as the visionary. And this is really about the big ideas. This is about the excitement. This is about what we can create and possibility. And so Daniel's thesis and argument is that an entrepreneur should try and live in the visionary state as much as possible. Now, if you listen to any of my other podcast episodes, you might have also heard Hannah Power, who came on and talked about flow and the different modes of operating, kind of similar to that. The key concept really that we're talking about here is this idea that we have a primal part of our brain, which is purely designed to keep us alive. And it is predominantly based in emotions such as fear, potentially anger, things that really are going to activate our fight or flight system. You may have heard before of something called the Hawkins scale, or the map of consciousness by David R. Hawkins. He talks about the different levels of consciousness and the survival paradigm he describes these exact emotions in. So right down the bottom are things like shame, guilt, apathy, grief, and then a little bit higher is fear, desire, anger. And these are kind of really our primal emotions and our primal state of being. Then we're really thinking about, how do we elevate that? And the reason I think it's so important to be able to elevate out of this is because I believe that's where our creative potential really lies. You can use other models and they all really point to this same idea or this same theory. So you could take something like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization is right at the top of that pyramid. And I believe that fulfilling your true potential is on par with self-actualization. And so this idea of creativity and this idea of building a business that allows us to live our most courageous life, our most creative life, is something that I've been fascinated with for a long time. And when I work with creative business owners, I see them doing their best work, getting paid the most, building things and working on projects that they're really proud of when they are continually able to operate in this state. And so these two things tie together, because it's much easier to live in this state if you have your basic needs covered. And finance and pipeline and leads and clients are all part of that. And so one of the things that we get a lot of our clients to do is to really set a number in terms of monthly income that would allow you to live in that state. Because a lot of people set this baseline far too low and they don't account for things going wrong. They don't account for saving money. They don't account for unexpected financial pressures. And so they set it at a bar, and Tony Robbins talks about a lot about this. He says, you don't get what you want, you get what you tolerate. And a lot of us will tolerate something far less than we actually need in order to be comfortable and move out of these kind of survival states into abundance and creative states. So let's loop this all the way back to the beginning about me taking a month off. I found, not through pressures on the business financially or any other reason, but I found purely because I'd been doing this for so long and haven't really forced these creative breaks and forced a lot of white space in my calendar very often, that I was really getting to the point where I was feeling a little bit burnt out. Now, I love what I do. I love my clients. But after 7 or 8 years of coaching and building a business, and at the time, beginning of this year, we were really looking to scale that business up. So I had a head coach that I brought in. We had a content person. We had lots of other people working for us. So we were building this team. And it got to the point in our daily conversations where business just really started to feel quite heavy. It started to feel like a grind. And I noticed in my body and in my energy that I was kind of living in this place of fear and scarcity and what ifs and heaviness. And now I look at that as a really good indication that something needs to change. Previously, I used to believe that that was just part of running a business. It was stressful, it was hard, and we're just in that business. Now, I will say that I do still believe business is one of the harder paths versus, say, getting a job. But if you've been running your business for a while, and you are good at what you do, you have a strong portfolio, you have clients that rave about you, business should not feel heavy. It should not feel hard. It should not feel like hard work in that sense. I really believe that as creatives, our predominant goal should be for our business to feel as light, as free, as fun, as creatively expressive as possible, because I genuinely believe that's where we do our best work. You have to have the foundations in, but that isn't related to how heavy a business feels. Like if you hate sales, that's not about not doing sales. That's actually, for me, about repositioning and reprogramming how you think about sales. We've got a great podcast episode on that with a company called Distorted, where the founder, Andy, says the way he used to just think about sales, he just really used to hate it. And now it feels really light, really easy, and really fun. So it's more about changing your perception of those things rather than changing the things that you do. But in general, your business should not feel heavy. It should not feel like this is something that you have to do, or like a grind is the way that I often describe it. And if it starts to feel like that and you start to feel stressed, the counterintuitive solution that actually works to remove that is to take a break. And I've seen this time and time again. I distinctly remember working with one of our clients. She was an interior designer. She was amazing at what she did. She had a couple of big projects, but she'd also have some nightmare clients. And she'd had some personal issues and things going wrong with her own house and all sorts of things that would stress anybody out. And I could just sense that she was really getting to the end of her tether. She was really getting close to burnout. And that was having an impact on the way she was showing up to new clients and new projects. And so she was just operating in this fear state. She was operating in these reptilian modes, which all they do is fuel more of that thing. So if you are in a predominant energy of fear, you will attract more people who are in that energy. And so her clients were acting in a similar way that she was acting. And what I mean by that is they were constantly scrimping and scraping at things. And what does this mean? And picking apart proposals and asking for snag amends and all of this stuff. She was like, why am I attracting these clients? And I was trying to explain to her, it's because that was the energy that she was living in. Right. And so I said to her, you have to take a step back. You have to have a break. And at the time, it felt like one of the scariest things to do because she had projects ongoing. She had potential new work in the pipeline and she had gaps in her cash flow and it felt really stressful. But she did it and she went on holiday. She took a week or so off. And when she came back, it was like she was a different person. And not only that, but within 2 or 3 weeks of her being back, she landed her biggest ever project because she was able to get her head above water. She was able to stop resonating in that frequency that was really sort of bogged down and this really kind of negative, fearful energy. And she was able to elevate her frequency. Now, I know maybe I'm starting to sound a little bit woo-woo here, but if you really look into these concepts, look into things like the David Hawkins scale, look into the Maslow hierarchy of needs, follow people like Dr. Joe Dispenza, even from a very physical point of view, Newton's third law or whatever it is about, it's so funny when you're trying to be authoritative on a podcast and you're like, Newton's third law or whatever. But the idea that energy can never be destroyed, right? It can only ever be transferred. So think about that in the context of the energy that we hold and the energy that allows us to operate and think and talk. Like that's all energy, right? And we're transmitting that all of the time. So my point here is that we are energetically in states and subconsciously other people pick up on those states. So not only does it mean that when you're in that state, you're not doing your best creative work, but it also means that you will tend to attract other people in those states and you will tend to attract those kind of clients. And so by taking a break, it allows you to step away from the problem and the things that are creating the stress, but it also allows your mind just to settle. And after a couple of days, your brain goes, oh, no one's died. Like nothing's burnt to the ground. Actually, maybe we are safe. Because that's ultimately what it's about. We're sending signals, we're sending messages to our brain that we're not safe. And that's what puts us into those fight or flight responses. It puts us into those fear-based emotions. So circling all the way back around to what I started to talk about at the beginning of this podcast, which was this idea of taking a month off. And as soon as I started thinking about the concept, my body started to feel lighter. And as soon as I made that decision, it was like a weight off of my shoulders. And that's, to me, always a really good sign that it's the right thing to do. So I just want you to think about what decisions or what things make your business feel lighter, feel more fun, feel more playful. What things, people, tasks, whatever, make your business feel heavy and like hard work, like a grind. And how can you eliminate some of those things? Or how can you at least put them on pause and put them on the back burner for a extended period of time to allow you to elevate yourself out of that state? And so it really reminded me of actually how I felt at school. And I remember this distinctly, even to this day. I finished sixth form and some friends of mine, we'd all planned to take a year off, right? The gap year, as it was known at the time, probably still is. And I remember going to a local pub, sitting outside on the grass and just feeling like all these lead balloons had just dropped away and I was just floating, and it just felt this sense of relief, and I just felt this sense of freedom, and it was just an incredible feeling. And the feeling I got when I decided to take that month off was very similar to that. And it's interesting to me because in that year, not only did I learn a lot about myself because I was kind of at that age, but I also felt like it was where I really got into my creative flow. So I was lucky enough to work for 6 months in a film production studio that my cousin ran. And it was just incredible. It was just this incredible experience. I did some really creative projects. I got to co-direct some projects, and it just felt like, yeah, this is what life is about. This energy, this flow, this creativity, this is where I want to live. And I think it's very, very easy for us to get sucked back into the other energy because the majority of people are living their lives in that energy. And I then went to university and I did the thing where I chose a course that I thought was sensible and practical, and it was computing and business. And I thought, I get a great job out of university if I study this, or this will give me lots of opportunities. But it was heavy and it was hard and it just didn't feel good. And luckily, I had the courage to say, actually, I don't want to continue this. I don't want to do this. I want to do something that feels the same as it felt when I worked in that film studio, when I left school, and that feeling of freedom and that feeling of creativity. And so I changed courses and I excelled in that course, right? And I really enjoyed it. And I built skills that then allowed me to get a job straight out of university for one of the UK's biggest marketing and advertising agencies in London. And that was quite uncommon at the time. I graduated in 2012. So at that time, like 2008 was a recession. So at that time, there still wasn't a huge amount of jobs and a huge amount of opportunities. And so I was one of the few people to be offered a job straight out of university. And I went into that job and I followed that thing. But then very easily, I started to get bogged down into that feeling again, because it's, for me, the thing that creates this is this idea of what we're supposed to be doing and this idea of what society expects, or the sensible option or the safe option. And I talk about this in my book, talk about this idea of security being an illusion. That's the thing that gets us dragged into that energy. We start doing things that we think we should be doing purely because someone has told us at some point that that's important, or society in some way says that's what we should do, or our friends are doing that, or our parents did that, or whatever it is. So I guess my message here, and the reason I wanted to record this episode, was because I think it's really important to listen to your body and feel the energy that you are in, and really make a conscious effort to choose that lighter energy. And if you go back to this idea of the David Hawkins scale, he kind of talks about these different levels, and he talks about the spiritual paradigm being at the top. But just to give you a contrast, the middle, where it starts to kind of get green, is neutrality. It's willingness, it's acceptance, forgiveness, optimism, trust, these kind of emotions. And then the next level up is love and reason and joy and peace. And then obviously enlightenment at the top. And these are kind of these energy frequencies. And a lot of the work that I do as a coach really is getting people into these energies and getting people into these states so that they can do their life's best work, their life's most important work, their life's most impactful work. And I love seeing that, because when you know that you've facilitated or helped somebody to unlock that within themselves and go out into the world and operate in that frequency more consistently, you know that there's a knock-on effect, and you know that they are then attracting the right kind of people and doing the best kind of work. So just going back to the two elements before I wrap this podcast up, it's almost like there are some necessary evils, I guess, the way I would look at it, which is the things that you need to do to get to the point where this becomes easier. And they're not a must, they just make it easier. So the only reason I'm able to do this is because I worked really hard for 6 or 7 years in my business to make it very financially stable and to create something that genuinely got results for people so that my clients kept coming back and that they were happy. That makes it easier, but it's not a necessity. So if you haven't done already, listen to the episode with Ben Talon that I did a couple of weeks ago where he talks about this, and he talks about his friend who was a father and had all these financial pressures and these bills and everything. And he was saying, not everybody is in this privileged position, but you can still create time and space for this. In fact, it's one of the things that we're actually doing next week with some of our clients. We're running a retreat in London, and we are going to spend 2 days giving people the tools, the systems, the frameworks, the courage, the confidence to get themselves into these states on a daily and weekly basis. Because you can create this. It's much easier with the space and the time and being able to say, right, I'm going to take a month off in my business. But you can do it without that. You can still do it whilst serving your clients. You can still do it whilst being a parent. You can still do it whilst managing and running a business. And I think it's really important now more than ever to have a tool set and to have a skill set that allows you to put yourself into that state and those energies and those frequencies and those emotions consistently in spite of what's going on outside. And therefore, you might not even need that whole month off. That's just something I've decided to do for me because I've worked hard to get myself into that position. You could argue that if I had spent more time doing these things that I'm preaching and done it more consistently, then I wouldn't have needed to take the whole month off. But that's a whole nother conversation. So after our retreat next week, I may record another episode with just a bit of a summary of the tools and the strategies and the things that we talked about and the ways that we're helping our clients to do that. If that would be useful for you, then I'd love to hear from you. As I said, as always, LinkedIn is my platform. So connect with me on LinkedIn, reach out, let me know if that would be useful for you. Let me know what content you've enjoyed so far. It's actually really nice since I've started the podcast. Almost every week I get a few people reaching out to me saying that they really enjoy it, telling me certain episodes that they found really helpful. So that makes this feel worthwhile doing. I hope you found this episode useful. It was a bit of a whirlwind. It was a bit of a kind of meandering conversation, but I felt like I really needed to talk about that because it resonated with so many people on LinkedIn the other day. Maybe that's just what you need. Maybe it's not a month, maybe it's a week, and maybe it's an actual holiday where you shut your laptop down and you don't talk to clients and you don't talk to your team. And it's like, I'm actually just going to switch off totally. I'm going to re-energize and I'm going to get myself back into that creative state. I'm going to get myself back into that energy where I know I'm in flow, where I know I'm doing my best work and I'm having the most impact that I can. As always, thanks for listening. This is the Creative Courage Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please hit subscribe, share it with a friend, and I'll see you on another episode.